Hi, welcome back. We're going to be going over the prophetic books of Amos and Hosea. And as you noticed from the previous video, I had gone over the PowerPoint for chapter 6 that describes the rise of prophecy. So here we are in Bible Gateway under the book of Amos. Let's look at that first, and then we'll take a look at Hosea. And in the next video, I'll go over wisdom literature, and we'll take a look at Proverbs 1 through 8. Okay, so let's take a look at Amos 1. He was a shepherd of Tekoa, which is in the southern state of Judah, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of King Uzziah of Judah and the days of King Jeroboam, son of Joash, 2 years before the earthquake. So this is roughly around 750 BCE. Amos is taken from the south and sent to the north by God in order to prophesy about the oncoming Assyrian invasion. So the very first set of prophecies he talks about is basically cursing the nations or the areas around Israel, almost to kind of say, oh, I don't like them, I don't like them, I don't like them, and then kind of centering ultimately on Israel and saying, actually, you're just as bad. So I'm not going to revoke the punishment against Damascus, which is in Syria, for the transgressions of Gaza, which is on the southern coast. It's one of the, like the Gaza Strip. 3 transgressions of Tyre, which is in Sidon on the northern coast. 3 transgressions of Edom. I'm not gonna, hold back punishment for them. Edom is to the west of Israel, along the other side of the Jordan. Ammonites also other side of the Jordan. So here we are. God is basically starts off right off the bat saying all of these nations that surround the country Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, are terrible. So I'm not going to withhold punishment because of their behavior. And it's kind of like a trick by God. He says for 3 transgressions of Moab, also on the other side of the Jordan, Moab is there. And then he kind of focuses in a little bit. I'm not going to hold back my punishment for Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah, because they have rejected the law of the Lord. So it almost seems like, as Amos is prophesying these things from God, that he's telling Israel, all of these nation states that are around you, they're terrible. They, deserve punishment. And, if you were in the northern state of Israel, you're like, yeah, that's right. Moab's terrible. Edom's terrible. Yeah, even Judah's terrible. And as he makes the list of all of these countries that are terrible, well, I'm not going to withhold punishment. Maybe part of you as an Israelite is saying, yeah. But then he says, he centers right on the target. For 3 transgressions of Israel and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment. And remember how I mentioned that Amos is one of the themes is righteousness and justice for the poor against the rich? Here he says, because they, as in Israelites, sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and push the afflicted out of the way. You're not very charitable to those people who are poor and needy. Father and son go into the same girl, so that my holy name is profaned. A father and a son have sex with the same woman. This is kind of the debauchery that Amos is talking about that's going on in the northern state of Israel. In the house of their God, they drink wine bought with fines they impose. Remember how I said taxation, enslaving their own people, things that Solomon started, which continued, are not things that God likes. So essentially, commanding or saying, I'm not going to hold back punishment against you Israelites, right? I will press you down in your place just as a cart presses down when it's full of sheaves. You notice the language that Amos uses is also something that the audience would understand. Like they know what it looks like when you have a full cart full of wheat, sheaves of wheat. Those who handle the bow shall not stand, and those who are swift of foot shall not save themselves. So really, no one is gonna, be excluded from the oncoming punishment, right? So here's some more prophecies about Israel's guilt and punishment. You should probably take a look at that. let's see. Hear this word in chapter 4, you cows of Bashan who are on Mount Samaria, who oppress the poor and who crush the needy. So basically condemning all of those real housewives of, LA County who just say to their husbands, give me more furs, give me something to drink, while they oppress the poor. So remember, Amos's themes of righteousness for the poor, for the, condemning the rich. This is another example of that. The Lord God has sworn by his holiness, the time is surely coming upon you when they shall take you away with hooks. Yikes, even the last of you with fish hooks, and you shall be flung out into Harmon. Bring your sacrifices every morning, your tithes, bring a thank you. But really, I'm not going to help you. You could do all this stuff with the temple, but it really doesn't help. Okay? I overthrew some of you, therefore thus I will do to you, O Israel, because I will do this to you. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. Pretty scary, right? Pretty scary stuff. Here's a lament in chapter 5. What is this day going to look like? Well, those who desire the day of the Lord, why do you want this day? It is darkness, not light. It's going to be bad, right? I hate all of these things that you do when you give me burnt offerings and stuff. Half of them are for other gods. I don't like them anymore, right? And then remember how I said that Amos was a visionary prophet? Let me show you that. Here's the series of visions that God shows Amos. First one is the locust at the time of the latter growth. Here he is, a shower of fire devouring the great deep and eating up the land. So this is what it's going to be like. It's going to be just devastation and arid and no crops and anything like that. These are the visions that he's showing Amos. He's showing him a wall with a plumb line. That's a line that measures the straightness of walls. Once again, the audience would know what he was talking about. And he says, I'm setting a plumb line in the midst of my people. I'm going to set a plumb line, an architect's tool, to measure the straightness of my people. Will they measure up? Unlikely, right? Because the people in their sin and their abusing of the poor are twisted and gnarled that they will never measure up. So here's the discussion with Amos and Amaziah, the kind of the court prophet, saying, hey, you know what? You've been saying stuff like Jeroboam will die by the sword, Israel will go into exile. Maybe you should go back to the land of Judah. Go there. And then Amos says, hey, I can't help it. God took me and made me say that. So basically, death and destruction is going to happen, Chapter 8 has a couple of other visions. And then at the chapter of 9, even though all of this stuff is guaranteed to happen, at the end, there will be redemption. Remember how I said the prophets will do all this doom and gloom, but at the end of it all, it has to happen, but at the end of it all, something good will happen. And on that day, I will raise up the booth of David that has fallen and repair its breaches and raise up its ruins. And it'll be good eventually, but not until all of this crap happens, and it will, because the Assyrians will eventually come in and take over, the northern state of Israel. So keep in mind the themes of Amos: doom and gloom. It's going to be terrible. The Lord is going to destroy everything, and especially target the rich because they oppress the poor. Okay, let's take a look at Hosea. And you'll notice it's distinctly different. Okay, so the same King Uzziah, so same contemporary of Amos. Hosea is a northern prophet that is speaking to the northern people. The very first thing that God makes him do, though, is take yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. So he has to go get married to a whore and have children from a whore as a representation of how Israel is a whore and is behaving against her husband God. So it's kind of a strange symbolic act, but Yeah, that's how he does it. So he has several children, and one of them is called Name Her Lo Ruhamah, or No Pity. I mean, that is harsh, right? And Lo Ami means not my people. So his children are even named after the very acts that God is going to do to the people of Israel. Um, so say to this symbolic family that you have that Israel behaved, your wife, symbolically Israel, behaved like a whore. She put away her whoring from her face and adultery from between her breasts. I will strip her naked, expose her as the day she was born, kill her with thirst. Upon her children I will have no pity because they are children of whoredom. So remember how I said that in Hosea, things are seen in sexual terms, even to the point where he has to marry a whore. He's basically making parallels between Hosea's wife, who's a whore, and Israel, his wife, who played the whore by going after other gods, by abusing their own people, etc. So he's basically saying, you behave like a whore, my country Israel, so I'm going to punish you like a whore. So, not great, right? Um, the Lord said to me again, go love a woman who has a lover and is an adulteress, just as the Lord loves the people of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. So God perceives worshiping other gods as whoredom, as basically sleeping with other gods. So I did, and I said to her, this is Hosea, you must remain as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore. You shall not have intercourse with a man, nor I with you. And the Israelites shall remain many days without a king or a prince. And afterwards, the Israelites shall return and seek the Lord their God. So this is the redemption part. Like, if it's almost like if you don't sleep with anyone or don't betray your God by worshiping other gods for many, 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 many years, it's almost like you can become not a whore anymore, and then God will accept you again. So that's what Israel really needs to do, is not go after other gods and sleep with them symbolically, and by doing so cleanse themselves of their whoredom and become a faithful wife, of chesed, steadfast love of God again. So here he is, once again accusing Israel. Um, Idolatry equals, here's your daughters play the whore, your daughters-in-law commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they play the whore. They commit adultery, for the men themselves go aside with whores, sacrifice a temple. A lot of whores and prostitute language to represent the people of Israel going after other gods, as you can see. There is going to be a judgment upon Israel and Judah, both Israel and Judah, and you're going to call out, but hey, this judgment is going to happen. And then in chapter 6, there's constantly kind of hope and redemption or repentance offered in Hosea, which is actually not offered in Amos until, of course, the very end. So here it is. Come on, let's return to the Lord. Um, when that happens, he's going to heal Israel. Um, and there will be, redemption towards the end. Okay, so here's more judgments against Israel. Here's the punishment for their sins. They're going to be captive. And then at the end of the chapter, you have God's compassion. So similar to Amos, where, all of this terrible stuff is going to happen. For Amos, the theme is righteousness and justice, punishing the rich for oppressing the poor. And in Amos, it's seen in sexual imagery, where Israel, by going after other gods, is behaving like a whore or a prostitute, to the point where Hosea has to do those symbolic acts. And there will be punishment. But at the end of it all, just like in chapter 9 of Amos and here in chapter 11 of Hosea, God will come back and will show compassion. But take a look at the language of Amos and Hosea. They're great representations of prophetic language, of oracles of judgment. And just make sure that you're familiar with that so you understand why the prophets were speaking at this point, pointing to the oncoming destruction by Assyria of the northern kingdom of 721, and then the major prophets talking about the Judean exile by the Babylonians in 587. So these prophets were the voice of God at that point.